Good morning. As Alina said, I'm a senior partner at McKinsey. I lead our global organization practice, and I also happen to have 5 daughters and 1 very empathetic son. So this is a topic that I am deeply passionate about. And I'm also thrilled to introduce to you 2 remarkable women who have been rallying for diversity in very different contexts. So please join me in welcoming Alice Law, who is the CEO of Committed to Good, a remarkable organization that provides employment and logistics to development and relief programs in war-torn countries, whether that's Ebola treatment centers in Liberia, or food distribution in Afghanistan, or assisting refugees in Libya. What's particularly remarkable is not just what she does, but how she does it. Being a force for good, creating opportunities for employment for women across all their efforts in so many countries. I'd also like to introduce Emilie Stordalen, who is the board member of the Stordalen Foundation, owner of the Strawberry Group and Nordic Choice Hotels, and project manager at eBerry. Emilie is a true champion of diversity and inclusion, with a particular focus on LGBTQI and on individuals who have gaps in their resumes, either because they're migrants or had issues with the law or addiction, and is doing some truly extraordinary things. So please join me in welcoming Alice and Emilie for this panel. Now, we only have a few minutes to talk about a topic that I think we could probably discuss for hours, if not days. What we're going to do is have each of us share a few perspectives on different aspects of diversity and inclusion, and then open it up to your questions. So, Alice, let me start with you. You have been working in some of the most fragile, some of the most conflict-affected countries in the world. And you've done it with an extraordinary passion and care for advancing diversity and inclusion. I'd love to hear more about why are you so passionate and some of the things that you're doing to make a difference.
So my kind of gender equality journey really started in Gaza in 2015 when I first went there. And one of my staff members, a lady called Salwa Nasser, she's a Palestinian civil engineer, and she's working for us on a project where we're monitoring the use of construction materials. And she said to me, she said, Alice, you know, you're amazing. You've got such a unique opportunity to make a difference for Arab women. And I said, really? Me? You sure? And I sort of went away and I thought about it. And then I was at the General Assembly in New York in September, and they launched the SDGs. And I went, SDG 5. Now I can do something about this. And so that was really the start of my gender equality journey, and really inspired me to do something about it. I went back to the team and I said, right, okay, we're going to focus on gender equality, we're going to focus on the SDGs and do what we can. And it really resonated with my team. And so we were on to a winner. And in 2017, on International Women's Day, we launched our Female First initiative, which is a recruitment initiative which looks at creating jobs for women in conflict settings, and has a goal, which I think is really important, of 30% of all of our project-related roles will be represented by women in 2030. So that's just one of our initiatives. I think our second key initiative, which was launched around the same time, is CTG Giving. Which has, again, a focus on gender equality, and recently, in the end of last year, ran an entrepreneurship training for survivors of gender-based violence in Somalia. So that's just 2 of our initiatives that we have that are running around gender equality.
Some extraordinary projects. And tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you are facing, and how do you overcome those?
So I think for me, the biggest challenge is kind of keeping up the momentum. And I think, you know, you can have a great initiative and everyone can really be behind it, but then everyone starts doing their day job and everything gets very busy. So it's kind of driving those initiatives, keeping everyone energized. What we have done is we've got a very robust strategy. And Within our strategy, we have various different projects and programs and initiatives, and then under those we have activities, and then we've now more recently started measuring those. So everyone kind of has an obligation to report on it individually, but also it kind of keeps that momentum going. And I think it's the hardest thing to do, to kind of keep up that energy levels, to keep people innovating and how we can do things better, and where we get challenges and where we get things don't work so well in the country, then how do we look at it a bit differently and approach it in a different way.
Fantastic. I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions for Alice, so please don't hesitate to send them in through the iPad, and we'll make sure we have plenty of time to ask questions to the group. Maybe before turning to Emilie, I thought I'd just share a few brief perspectives of some of the work that we've done at McKinsey on gender diversity in particular. Now, many of you may be familiar, but this is a topic we're very passionate about. And about 15 years ago, we decided to do some analysis, to do some research. And over time, we've tried to build the business case. Of course, we believe in the moral arguments, but we also wanted to bring the facts and the data and the science on why diversity of thought is good for business. And so over the last 15 years, we've published report after report, analysis after analysis, that shows an incredibly strong link between diversity of thought, gender diversity, ethnic diversity, particularly at senior executive team levels, and better financial performance over time, EBITDA margin, growth rates, et cetera, as well as stronger organizational health, stronger scores in leadership and innovation, culture and climate, and so on. Now, there are, of course, skeptics out there who think it may just be a coincidence. It's correlation. Can we prove causation? And of course, it's difficult to prove causation, but we think that there are a number of trends that clearly lend weight to why it's not just a coincidence. As one of the CEOs I work with likes to say, ignoring half the pool of human talent just doesn't make good business sense. Similarly, we know that in the vast majority of markets, women account for somewhere between 60 and 80% of consumer product purchasing decisions. There's a growing body of evidence that shows diversity of thought leads to better, higher quality, more innovative decisions. And of course, we know that young talent want diverse workplaces. Over 80% of young people in the UK say that is one of the key criteria they look for as they think about where they want to apply. And in many sectors and in many parts of the world, it's increasingly becoming a right to operate issue. So we think it's not just a coincidence, and we're trying to take our own medicine. I lead the organization practice at our firm, which is about 25% of our direct work and infuses another 50%. And one of the things that I've tried to do is to lead from the front. And I think one of the things I'm proudest of is that over the last few years, we've had record elections of new partners, and 60% are women. Now, we know we're on a journey, and we certainly won't declare victory. But I think one of the things that we're seeing is that there are ingredients to really making a difference around leadership from the top, passionate, public, visible, vocal. But it's also about top-down leadership coupled with bottom-up innovation and unleashing the power of so much diverse talent in our organizations. It's about putting the structure and the rigor and the KPIs that Alice talked about, and also changing the culture. And it's about passion and persistence over time. We know that you can't declare victory. As soon as you lift your foot off the accelerator, you don't stand still, you start going backwards. So let me now turn to Emilie, who's been doing some amazing things and who I think is very much at the forefront of diversity and inclusion and has brought some very pragmatic, very tangible approaches, as well as encountering some challenges that with her enormous energy and passion, she's overcoming. So Emilie, tell us a little bit more what rallying for diversity means for you.
Well, I work in hospitality and I work with hotels, and it's a very interesting thing when you think about what hotels actually are for societies, because hotels often are the first place where, like you said, immigrants or people with a different background or gaps in their CV actually end up applying for a job for the first time. And I personally think that that gives you that extra sense of responsibility to take it seriously. And we are a business, made for people and made of people. And I don't think that you understand your customers if you don't have a great diversity in your workforce. So, I currently work at a hotel called Clarion Hotel The Hub, which is newly opened in Oslo. So we had some product placement right there. I'm joking. But, we are a huge hotel. We have 300 employees, and they come from 60 different nationalities. And when we applied, when we went out to see, do you want to work for Clarion Hotel The Hub, we thought, how can we do something different to find new talent? Because sometimes, just your background stops you from getting the right job. You might not have the right bachelor degree. You might not speak the right language. But that doesn't mean you can't be a fantastic worker in the reception or do an amazing job in the restaurant. So I really believe in specific small initiatives that can make a big difference for your firm. Because I think these questions that we discussed are so huge and complex. And I think the key to success is for each business to find your solution. So a super interesting initiative that we did, I think, is that we arranged a talent hunt to attract new talent, which is kind of like an American Idol. So instead of looking and seeing the CV, we started with the person. So you went up, you had an audition for 2 minutes where everyone had the ability to present themselves and why they wanted to work for our company. And then, we had workshops, and then we looked at the CV. And more than 2,000 people applied for this job, and we found some amazing talents that I don't think we would have found if we didn't do these initiatives.
Those are some fantastic examples. Emilie, I know you've also encountered some challenges. Would love to hear your thoughts about, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing, and how do you think about overcoming those?
Well, I think, we live in a very polarized world right now, made by certain politicians, and I think it's important to stand up for your values and what you believe in, and when you do that, people are going to criticize you. For instance, in the work that we do for Pride, Norway is a fantastic and inclusive society, but we still have a way to go, and we realized that when we publicly, supported Pride and the organization, and I think it was interesting. It was an eye-opener because for me, it was more. Of course, there's no problem in supporting this and speaking vocally about this initiative, but it is. And I think that was an eye-opener. And I think when you have those challenges, when you get the critique, it's very important to stand your ground and maybe support the initiatives even more.
Thank you. Fantastic. So please do send in your questions. I have a few that have started come through on my iPad, so I'll kick off with the first one. Question which is the problem maybe with upbringing and education systems, which results in gender imbalances in the workplace? Mm-hmm. So, Emilie, do you want to kick us off, and then Alice, you can join in?
Well, I think it's linked a little bit to what I just spoke about. I think education is fantastic, but I also think that you don't necessarily need a certain degree to do fantastic in a job. And I think for immigrants, for example, who might not have the ability to start off in an educational, formal way, it does put some limitations to you. That also applies for people who have gaps in their CV. When that's said, I think education is a great thing, but it does create a little bit of differences. Mm-hmm.
Alice?
My perspective is probably a little bit different because the workplace we're talking about is not a nice office with a desk. The women who work for us can be out in the field. We have, I'll use the example of one lady we have working for us in Somalia, a lady called Nusra, who has been working for us about 3 or 4 years, I think. And she's working on a project where we are monitoring food distribution. So food gets distributed to all sorts of villages and beneficiaries, and we go and make sure that that is actually being done the correct way and the right amount of food has been distributed according to what has been declared. And she started as a field monitor. It's a very dangerous job. She's working out in the field. She's pretty vulnerable out there. And she's now recently been promoted to be a team leader, where she is managing a team of men, and she's local. She's a local Somali, and she is managing a team of men who are the field monitors. And so we've had to run a lot of education with them in terms of understanding not only around harassment and other gender-based sensitivities, but also about allowing a woman to be a leader and a Muslim woman in a local Somali environment. So that is sort of one thing in terms of what they're actually doing. The biggest challenge we find with regards to finding the right people to work is actually, it starts much earlier on. So it's how do we find women to work for us in a, and someone said a great word, marginalized, we are in very much marginalized society where we're working, where women actually don't apply for jobs. And so we have to work with families, we have to do community outreach, to encourage families to allow the male part of the family to allow their wives, their daughters, their mothers to actually apply for a job in the first place. So,
fantastic, thank you. Maybe just one other thought on that question, because I do believe that there are biases in education, in upbringing, in the context and culture in which women and men grow up. There was a fascinating experiment recently in the US in which there were a group of Asian American women who were taking a math test. And they split the group in half, and half the group, they reminded them right before they took the math test that they were women, and they performed significantly lower. The other half of the group, they reminded them just before they took the math test that they were Asian, and they actually performed significantly higher. So I think there's unconscious biases at all levels, right? And that's why it's so important to address this. There's no silver bullet, it's silver buckshot. You have to do lots of different things with passion and persistence. Let me move to some of the other questions. So one of the questions that came in is, diversity and inclusion is such an intangible thing. How do you actually measure the impact of your work? Now, Alice, you talked about KPIs and metrics. We'd love to hear from you, and then also from you, Emilie.
Of course.
So we've just recently invested a lot of time and money in a software that's been developed to actually measure your impact for businesses as a whole. It's all very well having a large number of social initiatives and having a great corporate social responsibility policy, but without impact, it's completely worthless. So we have a new software which is aligned with our strategy and our 3 pillars within it, and aligned with the projects and activities that we've got under it, and then all our field offices will actually report using against a lot of indicators, several hundred, I think, and they will then report on that to give us hopefully some really good data to actually show how impactful our initiatives are. I think long term it will really help us decide which initiatives that are the ones that are the most successful and that are going to keep going, but I think it might also unveil some quite interesting facts around some of the countries that we're working in with regards to women being empowered in the workplace, their role in the marketplace, their actual role in the communities as well.
Thank you. Emilie?
No, I think it's a very interesting and important thing to raise because, like you say, I think it's easy to have just a very broad corporate social statement that you talk about, but with numbers you can actually concretize it a little bit. And we thought about this in Nordic Choice, so we actually report on a triple bottom line with people, planet, and profit, and we report on it in that order. And within each of these bulks, you actually have certain KPIs that you as a leader have to meet. So for instance, in people, we have something called the beat, which is a score that our employees take that range from how well are you doing, how do you thrive at work, do you feel like you're being challenged. Each leader has to report on the inclusion of people from different backgrounds, on gender equality. So we're trying to, as much as possible, really have certain numbers that you have to report on, because then you can actually see it. It makes it like a much more tangible thing to do, and I think it has a big impact.
I agree. I think
because we have, like now we have 67% female leaders, general managers in our hotel, which is wonderful. And it's a lot has to do with just the focus and being, we're going to have that certain number.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think radical transparency in and of itself is actually a catalyst for change.
Yeah.
And sometimes sunlight is the best disinfectant. So really focusing not just on what are the things that you're doing and measuring whether or not they're having impact, but what are the results? And also, what's the satisfaction? What's the feedback from those diverse groups themselves? So I'm going to keep going because there are lots of questions flowing in, which is fantastic. So let me ask another question, which is, and this is one that I am definitely not the right person to answer, but is perception about diversity different in challenging areas like Somalia compared to what it would be in Norway? So maybe Alice and then you, Emilie, again.
This is my first time to Norway, so I'm not sure I'm the best to answer that. But I can compare it to Europe. I'd say absolutely it's completely different. The challenges I personally have felt as a woman in my own personal career, working in London first, it's very different to the kind of challenges that are faced by women in conflict settings. It's, again, I come back to making it an empowering place to work, but also in challenging settings, you really need to make sure that, I'm sure people who read the press on this, that there is going to be no harassment in the workplace, so to speak. It is a very dangerous environment, and it is a kind of environment where abuse of women is an act of war. And so therefore you have to make sure that you've taken necessary measures to ensure your staff are trained, and that they understand the role of women, and that women should actually have a right to work, but actually have a right to be safe as well.
Yep, thank you.
No, I agree. I think the comparison for me is a little harder to make, but I think the only thing I want to add is that I lived abroad for a large part of my life, and I feel it's huge differences just inside, to the US compared to Norway, London compared to Norway. So, of course, there would be large differences, but for me, it's hard to make that comparison because I don't have that experience in it.
So let me move to a next question then, which is, how do you change the culture? How do you change mindsets and behaviors around marginalized people, around diverse populations? So maybe this time I'll ask Emilie, and then you, Alice.
I think it has to start from the top. It really does, and people have to believe in it. I think setting up concrete numbers and goals is an important part of it. And really, like I said in the beginning, find what suits your business the best, and find those initiatives that you can actually complete. It doesn't have to be large always. It can sometimes be very concrete and small, like our talent hunt, for instance, or we also distribute, legal help for immigrants coming to Norway applying for jobs, just because the paperwork is very difficult. So those little things have a very big impact.
Thank you. Alice?
I agree with Emilie, actually. I think leadership is absolutely key, unless your leadership is behind the initiative. And I think you see a lot of the Business for Peace honorees are all leaders. They're not necessarily the staff from within an organization. If you don't have the commitment of your shareholders, of your CEO, of your leader, then an initiative will probably die. It certainly won't have any financial support, and I think that's required. However innovative and creative you can be, you need money to be able to push an initiative forward, and you need to be allowed the time to be able to do it as well. So I think leadership's key, but the other thing for me is making sure that everyone is behind it. Like your whole team have to be fully behind it. You need to give them responsibilities. And they have to have accountability to actually be able to drive the initiatives forward, because as one person, you can't do it alone. And you're not going to achieve very much.
I might just add in, because in my organization practice role, we've actually spent a ton of time thinking about how do you actually change mindsets and behaviors. And what we found from all the research that we've done is actually there are 4 things. They all have to be in place, and they all have to be mutually reinforcing. And leadership is absolutely critical. What people say, but even more importantly, what they do. Because people will watch your feet, not your lips. And it's really important that through your actions, where you spend your time, who gets promoted, who gets sidelined, that it's consistent with the set of behaviors that you want to see. The second thing, of course, is you need to have a compelling change story. You need to communicate and engage if you want to see a change in behaviors. And it's not just the what and the how, but the why. Why does this matter? And why does this matter to me? You need all of your systems and processes, the KPIs, so that's where metrics are key, to reinforce the new set of behaviors. And there's also a capability building angle. In a lot of the work I do in diversity and inclusion, I find senior leaders whose heart is in the right place, they just don't know how. And many of them are either unconsciously or consciously incompetent. So part of it is, how do we build skills and capabilities to actually engage with diverse populations in the right way, to have the right conversations, to lift aspirations of some of these diverse groups. So all 4 of those things have to be in place to drive real change. Now I see the flashing light, so let me just close by asking, what's the one final parting thought, the final recommendation or idea that you would leave this group with? Alice?
For me, I think it's about understanding, as an individual, you need to, first of all, understand what is your sphere of influence? Where can you make a change? We looked at, we are operating in countries and in areas where no one else goes to. And so that was really where we decided to focus our efforts. So I think, for me, first of all, identify your sphere of influence and where you can have the biggest impact. Secondly, have a very good strategy. And thirdly, measure it and report on it, because I think it's really important that people understand and you know what you're doing and you've got results.
Thank you. Emilie?
Yeah, I think look at your business as a reflection of society. I think that's a very important thing. And to find the initiatives that suits your particular business, to actually walk the talk and not just talk about things.
Thank you. My closing thought is that everyone in this room is a leader. And at the end of the day, you set the culture, you create the context, you set the environment in which diverse populations can thrive and achieve their full potential or not. And ultimately, it's up to you. It's up to all of us, and the choice is ours. Thank you.